Hello and welcome to the fifth workbook that we have on Ansible. Okay, so if we look at our Ansible automation lab at number 5, we can see slight differences. We have the addition of a second app server for which we're not going to configure. And we have the introduction of a Juniper router as well, Junos 1, as we can see connected between Manchester and London. So in this scenario here, we've been requested by the head of networks to explore the interoperability between vendors. The company is considering introducing Juniper networks into the core, and they need you to ensure that this can be done. It says, while your company is new to network automation, the networking team wants a demonstration of what Ansible can do, and your manager wants you to start introducing best practice. Okay, so our tasks is Junos 1 has been introduced into the network and has management connection and a link between Manchester and London. NTP has been removed from the routers. So your first task is remove the variables from your host file and use a group stroke host variable file instead to keep your main host short and concise. Write a single playbook that will configure 2 NTP servers on both Cisco and Juniper routers, and build a single playbook to validate the NTP configuration on both Cisco and Juniper. Okay, so what we're doing basically in this is we are going to have a look at the way the files are formatted, the structure of our Ansible hosts, and we are going to have a look at some modules this time that we've not used before. And then we're going to use interoperability, so we're going to be using things like when statements to state in our playbooks that if the device belongs to a particular vendor, then run this set of commands, and if devices belong to a different vendor, run these commands instead. So we're going to be doing some looping, and we're going to be doing some when statements as well. So all in all, this should be a very interesting lab, and we're using NTP because it's relatively straightforward, and both Cisco and Juniper have modules of the same syntax for them particular commands. So let's have a quick look at what we're doing with our host file. So if you remember, in our hosts we had our routers, our edge. I've now introduced Junos. We could ignore the 2 servers for now. And if you remember, we had our variables in there. So within our host file, we had routers, then we had router variables, edge, and then we had edge variables as well. And what was happening there is that the host file was starting to get a little bit cluttered with variables for every single individual group of devices. Now, the best practice for using Ansible for groups and hosts is to have individual variable files for each individual type of either group or host that you have, because by default when we run a playbook, or what happens is that it looks in the host file, finds the host, in this case say London, and it picks its IP address. And of course you don't have to put the host name in, you can just use the IP if you want. And then what it does by default, it looks in host vars, so it goes into a host variable file and to see if there is one that matches the host name, and if it does, it will use the variables that are in the host var. If it can't find anything in the host var folder, it automatically looks in the group vars folders. If it can't find anything that matches the host name in the group file folders, then it will then take the variables that are automatically in the host file itself. So this is best practice. So basically, as an example, under my host, I have Junos 1, which is this one here. So if I was to run a playbook against Junos 1 now, it will see that there's a host name. It will automatically go into the host variable file, folder rather, and if it can see a file, then it will use the variables that we've put in there. So as you can see, I've got the likes of my Ansible connection of netconf, got the network OS as Junos, the username, password, and I've put some SSH algorithms in here as well. Now, let's say, for example, it wants to connect to one of the devices that are in the Edge group. Of course, we don't have any of these devices listed individually in the host, so it will fall back to the group variables. So it will go to the group variables and say, okay, we're looking at Edge, so it'll go to the Edge, and it will then apply whatever variables we're using here, i.e. username, password, the Ansible port, network CLI, and the network OS. Now, the reason that we do this is that while everything in the Edge group is using the same details, let's say we used to add another Edge router in there, but we was using a different username and password for that. It might not even be the same vendor. For example, we could then put that into our host variable to state, well, okay, we have specific sets of variables just for that individual host, or we can use the ones for the actual group itself. And not only that, as I said, it keeps our actual host file clean and concise. As we can see, it's a lot better now. And again, in the lab environment, we are only using, you know, what, 9 routers, whereas obviously in the production environment, depending on the size of your business, you can have hundreds or even thousands of routers. And in fact, you're not limited to using just hosts as your inventory, even though we haven't specified any other hosts at the moment. You can run your Ansible playbooks, and we'll do this in a later video, and call upon different host files, because again, if you've got hundreds or thousands of devices, you might not want them all within one host file. You might want to split them into other ones. But this is more of a housekeeping thing though. You know, whatever makes it easier for how you and your business want to use this. Okay, so the task was to create a single playbook that will add NTP onto both the Juniper and the Cisco devices, and to do another playbook that will validate this. So what we'll do the validation one first. Reason being is that we can quickly run that and see whether or not there is any NTP on these particular devices. So let's get a terminal up and running on here. Should have already got that up. All right. Oh, actually, I do have terminals right there. Yeah, there you go. As we see here, I'm in my virtual environment, so that's great. So let's create our first file. Let's get rid of that. Don't want that there. Let's touch show underscore ntp dot YAML. Oh, talking about YAML, I forgot to mention that when you're using your group files or your host files for your variables, they need to be in YAML format. So if you remember when we had our variables in the host folder, or the host file I should say, we had the likes of Ansible SSH password equals, then no space, and what it was, so like YouTube, etc. When you're using a host or group variable file, you need to put it in YAML. So in which case we have the key and then we have the value, so, and we see it is separated by the colons there, or the double colons, or whatever it is you pronounce that particular icon. Okay, so let's start on our first playbook. So let's do show NTP YAML, and let's start off as always with our 3 lines, and let's do name, show NTP, hosts. And the hosts here, they're going to be, let's see, we'll do Edge, routers, and we'll do Junos as well. So we're going to run it against all 3 of these groups. The reason I didn't put all is because if you remember having a look in the host file, I still have some servers in there as well. We don't want to run them against them. I mean, I could take them out and then just run it against everything, but that's not really necessary. So gather facts is no. Okay, so let's do our first tasks. Oops, that should be tasks. All right, and let's give it our name, and we'll do the Cisco configuration first. Display NTP Cisco, and what we're going to use now, we're going to use our Cisco iOS command module. So the module is going to be cisco.ios.ios_command, and then we're going to give it our list of commands that we want to do. Now we're going to create a list of commands, so when we do the dash and then put whatever we want afterwards, we're effectively creating an actual list on here. So let's do a show ntp config. Let's do a show ntp associations, CIATIONS, and let's do a show ntp packets, TP packet. Okay, so that is the commands that we're going to do, and obviously we want to register the output of these commands. So register, and let's call it Cisco_NTP. Now if you do a dash between Cisco and NTP, or between any string and another string, then that will fail when you do run your actual playbook. The actual dash is not recognized as an actual variable, so that's why we put the actual underscore. Now this is where it gets a bit interesting. What we're going to do now is that we want this to only run when it's running against a Cisco device. So we're going to use the when statement. So when, and we need to say, well, what's the condition? So the condition is if the network operating system is Cisco iOS. So when ansible_network OS, underscore OS equals, and then put in quotations. So it would be cisco.ios.ios. Okay, so what it's doing, it will look in the, let's just save that while we go here. It will look in the variables, so just pick on edge, and you'll notice that the Ansible network OS is pre-configured to Cisco iOS. So that's what it's looking for. If it has this, then it's going to run it on that particular device only. Okay, so what we've done then, so we've created our basic NTP show commands, and we've told it to only run these commands if the operating system matches what we've got here. Okay, so that's good. All right, so let's do our next task, which is to actually display the output. So name, so display Cisco NTP. Okay, that's fantastic. All right, now we do our debug our message. Okay, so we have our message. All right, so we've called it Cisco_NTP. So let's do our _NTP.stdout_lines. Okay, now the thing is, we also have to do the when statement on here as well. So we'll copy that out. Now I can't put the when statement here because in this particular indentation it's still part of the debug message, so we need to ensure it's at the same level. And you paste it in and it still doesn't go where you want it, so I still got to pull it back one anyway. All right, okay, let's save that. So what that should do, that should now only run these three commands if the operating system is Cisco, and it will display those commands as well. So that is our first one. So now what we'll do, we'll play around and get Juniper done now as well. So we get the Juniper NTP set up. So let's do our name, and it's going to be display Junos NTP. And now we need to tell it what module we're going to use. In this case, the module for Juniper is Juniper networks.junos.junos underscore command. You'll notice that the modules can be very, very similar between Cisco and Juniper and some of the other vendors as well. But the likes of Juniper and Cisco, they were both instrumental when Ansible was first set up. They were kind of like some of the sponsors of them. So that's why they're fully established within Ansible with the likes of their modules, their playbooks, etc. Whereas you get other vendors, they say like Huawei now, they're mainly community managed modules. So let's do our Juniper. So there we go, Juniper networks, Junos command. Okay, that's fantastic. So now we need to tell it what commands we want it to do. And again, we're going to do a list. So let's do a show NTP associations. Did I spell that right? ACC. No, never. AOCIAT. There you go. Show NTP associations. No. Do you know what? As you've gathered by now, my spelling is absolutely garbage. So I'm just going to copy that out there because I'm really lazy. There we go. Fantastic. The next command will be show NTP status. Okay, that's fantastic. Now let's register this, and let's have the register output as, let's say, Junos NTP, Junos underscore NTP. And now what we need to do, we need to do our when statement on this as well. So when Ansible Network OS equals Junos. Okay, that is done. So now we need to do our last task on this, which is just to display the Junos details. So let's go back one. So name, display Junos output. Okay, and debug and message. I remember and it's going to be Junos underscore NTP dot std out underscore lines. Okay, and now we need to also do the when statement as well. And of course I'm going to copy that because one's lazy. So copy and paste in the wrong place again. Move that forward. There we go. Save that. So let's run this command now, and this playbook, and see what actually happens with this. And we'll use this again after we've actually added our NTP. So this is just to confirm that NTP is or isn't on the devices at the moment. So let's do Ansible playbook, and it's show ntp.yaml. All right, okay, so let's see what's happening. So it's displaying NTP Cisco. It's connected to connected to them, but you notice that how it actually skipped the Junos, and now it's skipping all the Cisco ones. It's doing the task for display Junos NTP. So let's have a look. So it's showing us here that NTP is not enabled on any of them, which is exactly what we expect to see. Seems to be hanging a little bit. Oh no, here we go. It's done the Junos one. So the Junos one, we can see here that nothing's been received, so there's no NTP on there at all. And we can see our, actually let's make that a bit bigger actually. We can actually see now our output. It's run all the commands fine. So we've used one playbook and we've iterated over commands within 2 different vendors. All right, that's absolutely fantastic. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll write our actual playbook to add the NTP servers onto both the Juniper and Cisco. So firstly, if we have a little look, I've got so many things open down here. If we have a little look on Cisco's Ansible namespace, so we can see under Cisco iOS, these are the modules. Now we've mainly used the command module and the config module. However, they have an NTP global module here, and this is what we're actually going to use. We're going to use the global module for this. And if we scroll down, we can see what we need, what we can do. So we have things like config, we have the likes of our peer. If we do peers, we can do a list, and this is perfect for us because we're putting on more than one particular NTP server. Now if we was, for I'm say, only doing one NTP server, we could just run that as an iOS command, and then we you know NTP server, put the address in, put the version in if we wanted to, and jobs are good. But because we're running multiple ones, then we'll use this actual global module here for Cisco. Now consequently, if we go to Juniper's collection on Ansible, we will also see that they also have an NTP global module, and their global module follows the exact same format. So you have your config command. If you scroll down a bit further, you have your peers command, and in the peers you can use a list. So that's great. And by the way, if ever you're on the Ansible documentation, if you scroll down, they always give you some basic examples of configurations that you can use. So even if you've never seen it before, or you don't know what you're doing, this is the resource that you'll use. So you just do a Google search for Ansible, whichever vendor modules. So if we go back for Cisco's got modules specifically for everything. So you've got your generic default modules that you can use, i.e. your config, your commands, but you've got specific modules. Let's say, for argument's sake, you wanted to do LACP, for argument's sake. Well, you'd have a look at LACP, and then you'd follow the parameter. So you've got likes of configs. You can put a dictionary in there rather than a list. You can put what sort of states that you want it to be, and you'll have the likes of your examples there that you can play around with. So mainly, anytime you're automating with Ansible, the documentation on Ansible's website is always going to be your go-to for everything. If you don't know what you're doing, or you want to do something you've never done before, there will be a guide here on roughly how to achieve that, and it's just a matter of labbing it out until you get it working. Okay, so let's create our, so let's do such add ntp.yaml. I could leave that as that, but I won't. All right, so add ntp.yaml. Where did it put it? There we go. Okay, so again, let's start off with our 3 dashes. So name, we'll call it add multi vendor NTP. Now you notice I've not been putting the connection type in here because one doesn't need to do that, because we have them within the group variables now, which is something that we really needed to do because Juniper doesn't use the network CLI, it uses netconf. So we wanted to make sure they were split out. If we sort of put the Ansible connection as networks _ CLI, then the Juniper ones wouldn't work. So we omit that from the actual playbooks, because we've put them in the actual group variable files themselves. Okay, so let's do our hosts, and in which case we're going to do the same. We're going to do edge, routers, Junos, and gather facts is going to be no. All right, fantastic. Now what we're going to do, we're going to put our variables, some variables in here. Since we're going to put the same NTP servers on both sets of vendors, then we can list them all individually within each vendor's particular section, but because they're going to be the same, we might as well declare them at the beginning of the actual playbook. So let's go. So let's do our vars, and we'll give it a name for our variable. Let's just call it NTP _ servers, and then we'll create a list of our servers. So it's going, and we have to do that as a string. So it's going to be 192.168.122.100. That's our first one. And it's going to be 192.168.122.8, I believe. If you're wondering why the IP address is slightly different, it's because I'm on I'm remoting into a different machine and to the one I was recording on before. So instead of the NAT range being 192.168.47.x, it's on this one 192.168.122.x. Okay, so that is our NTP variables done. So let's do our tasks. So our first task is going to be, we're going to add NTP for Cisco, and we're going to use this time the module that we saw before, which was, if we scroll up, oh, actually let's get into the module itself. We're going to use the Cisco iOS NTP global module. In fact, I'll copy that out because you know me by now. My typing and spelling is atrocious. So we'll use this module. I'll just paste that in there. Oh, it didn't copy. No. All right, fine. I'll type it out then. So it's going to be Cisco.iOS iOS.ntp_global. Okay, so that's what we're going to use as our module. So Cisco.ios.ios.ntp_global. Okay, so now we need to do config, because we noticed when we looked at it, that's the first thing that we can do is config. And then you notice that it said that we could do peers. Now, if we was only doing one peer, we'd leave it as peers. Sorry, it's peer, but we're doing multiple peers, so we'll do it as peers. Now, what we need to do, we're going to use a Ginger template here. So the peer is going to be, and we'll put it in quotation marks. So as we know, this is a Ginger template, and we're going to do item. And now we need to tell it, what we want it to loop with. So we want it to loop through NTP servers. So let's make sure that it is in the correct stanza of the actual playbook. So loop, and we'll do our double quotations. So NTP_servers. Okay, so that's all we need for that. So if we was to run this now, it will add them in absolutely fine, but it will fail when it comes to the Junos, because Junos doesn't use the Cisco iOS module. So we're going to use a when statement on this. So when, and we're going to do Ansible network. So Ansible_network_OS, and the OS is going to be Cisco.ios.ios. Okay, so that is the first task done. Let's do the second task now, to do it on Juniper as well. Add NTP Junos. And now we need to tell it what module that we're going to use. So the module in this case is going to be Juniper Networks .junos_NTP_global. Now, because they use the same actual playbook, well, not playbook, same module, they follow the same format. So config and peers, and let's put our peer in there, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to put in NTP servers for that as well. NTP_servers, and now we need to do our when statement. We need to do our loop. Sorry, that should be items actually. Sorry, my bad. That's item, and then the other part is now the loop. We put that particular part in there. Okay, so now we can do our loop. So ntp_servers. Okay, now we can do our when statement, so it only runs when it's on Juniper. So when is going to be network OS Junos. Okay, that should be all we need. So let's confirm. All right, so add multi-vendor, host edge routers Juniper, gather facts node are variables which are ntp_servers. We have the server addresses as a list. Our task, so add NTP to Cisco using the Cisco iOS NTP global. We've got our config peers, set to item, so this Ginger template here. We're going to loop through the NTP_servers, and only when this is for Cisco iOS. And we're doing the same thing for Juniper. We're using the Juniper Junos NTP global. We're configuring the peer again, and we're looping all the way through. So let's run this and see what happens. Okay, so let's run the playbook and see what happens. So Ansible playbook, and let's add ntp.yaml. Let's have a look and see what happens. Okay, so there we go. It's configuring the Cisco devices, skipping the Juniper because we're in the Cisco part of the syntax at the moment. Okay, so now it's on the Juniper part of the syntax, so it's skipping the Cisco devices. And here we can see here that all the devices, they have changes that have been made. So let's run our verification now. So the show ntp.yaml. So Ansible playbook, show ntp.yaml, and we'll see what we can find with this. We should start to see NTP configuration on the devices. Again, on the Cisco part of it, so it's missed the Juniper, now it's on the Juniper part. Wonderful, let's have a look. Okay, so Juniper, we can see now that that we have NTP configured. We have a stratum of 3, so that's the primary server. Okay, so let's have a look at the Cisco. Okay, so we can see that the Cisco ones have now been configured as well, which is absolutely fine and dandy. So basically what we've managed to do, we've managed to write our playbooks, we've managed to loop through lists of NTP servers, and of course this can be lists of anything where you want to generate a list. You can use the loop to put through them, so you can have variables for anything. So let's say you can have variables for IP addresses, for access lists, anything you fancy. Stuff that we will go through in future videos. And then we've done the when statement, so specific parts of the playbook will only be actioned upon or executed to different networking vendors. So we've managed to use both Cisco and Juniper. We've managed to run playbooks against, singular playbooks against both those devices at the same time. So there you go. Hope you've enjoyed that. It's been great, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.